in a conservation laboratory in the city of Ghent. In the spring of 2019, a restorer working under magnification paused. She was examining the central panel of what is widely considered the most important painting in Western art. A work that had survived Napoleon, survived the Second World War, survived more documented theft and seizure events than any other painting in history. And as she looked more closely at the image she had spent years studying, the thing she expected to find was not there. The familiar, sideward-facing eye of the lamb at the painting's center had been replaced, under her instruments, by something older, something no one had documented. An eye that faced directly forward, directly at her. Steady, red-rimmed, and unmistakably present. The lamb at the heart of the Ghent altarpiece. The lamb that pilgrims had knelt before since 1432. That scholars had written about for 6 centuries. That emperors and military commanders had stolen and coveted and transported across Europe, was not the lamb Jan van Eyck had painted. Someone, at some point in the centuries between Van Eyck's death and that morning in 2019, had changed it, and they had done so carefully enough that the world had not noticed for nearly 500 years. The Ghent altarpiece was completed in 1432 in the Cathedral of St. Bavo in Ghent, where it still stands today. Jan van Eyck, the Flemish master widely credited with bringing oil painting to its technical peak, produced a polyptych of 24 panels that contemporaries could barely explain. 12 feet tall and 15 feet wide when fully opened, it depicts a vast theological panorama. Angels, prophets, apostles, knights, and pilgrims converging from every direction across a landscape of impossible luminosity. At its very center, on the lower register, stands a lamb. Blood flows from a wound in its chest into a golden chalice. Angels kneel in adoration on either side. This is the Agnus Dei, the Lamb of God, the theological axis around which the entire composition turns. For nearly 600 years, every pilgrim, scholar, and art historian who stood before this panel saw the same thing. A calm, symbolic creature gazing softly to one side in the manner of the animal it represents. Passive, docile, a perfect emblem of sacrifice. Napoleon's soldiers transported it to Paris with extraordinary care. Nazi officers personally oversaw its removal from Belgium in 1942 and placed it in a salt mine in the Austrian Alps. Everyone wanted the Ghent altarpiece. Everyone who looked at it believed they were looking at Van Eyck's original vision. And for all of that time, they were not. In 2012, the Royal Institute for Cultural Heritage in Brussels launched a restoration project of unusual scale. The altarpiece had been cleaned and examined before, most recently in the 1950s, but the tools now available: infrared reflectography, X-ray fluorescence mapping, macro scanning techniques capable of charting the chemical composition of each paint layer without touching them, had no precedent in earlier conservation work. Panel by panel, over the course of years, the team built a picture not just of what was visible, but of everything beneath it. Underdrawings, pentimenti, and paint applied by hands other than Van Eyck's. Some of what they found was expected. Centuries-old paintings accumulate intervention. What they were not prepared for was what they found directly on the mystic lamb panel. The paint covering the lamb's face was chemically distinct from the layers beneath it. Laid white, vermilion, and smalt, pigments consistent with 16th century Netherlandish painting practice, not with Van Eyck's palette. This overpainting had not been applied to fill in surface damage. It had been applied to cover something that was perfectly intact, and it had been applied with enough skill to go entirely undetected for 4.5 centuries. The decision to remove it was not made quickly. The overpainting had been in place for at least 450 years and had, in a real sense, become part of the painting's accumulated history. But the original beneath it was stable, undamaged, and what it contained, the technical reports made clear, was extraordinary. The removal took months, working under microscopes, using instruments finer than a human hair. The conservation team lifted the 16th century layer one fragment at a time. As the overpainting came away, something the world had not seen since before the Reformation slowly emerged. The lamb's forward-facing eyes, the large red-rimmed lids, a gaze that looked not to the side but directly outward, with a directness that stopped everyone in the room. By all accounts from those present, the laboratory went completely quiet. Who changed the lamb's face and why has no definitive answer. The pigment analysis dates the overpainting to somewhere between 1550 and 1600, a period of catastrophic turbulence in the religious life of the Low Countries. Protestant iconoclasts had smashed religious images across Flanders and Holland. Altarpieces were destroyed, defaced, hidden throughout the region. The Ghent altarpiece itself had been dismantled and concealed multiple times during these decades to protect it from reformist mobs. Against this backdrop, at some unknown point, someone approached the most sacred panel of the most venerated altarpiece in Ghent and changed the face of the Lamb of God. The most plausible interpretation is discomfort. Van Eyck's original lamb was not a conventional devotional image. Its forward-facing eyes, its somewhat human-looking face, its refusal to offer the viewer the comfort of symbolic distance. These were deliberate choices by an artist of absolute precision. Van Eyck painted nothing accidentally. The lamb was designed to look back at whoever stood before it, not to soothe, but to confront, not to represent sacrifice from a safe allegorical remove, but to embody it in a way that demanded something from the person in the room. The 16th century painter who covered those eyes appears to have decided, for reasons we can only reconstruct, that this was too much, that a holy image should offer gentleness, not confrontation, that a lamb should look like a lamb. But in making that correction, they erased the central theological argument Van Eyck had built into the heart of the composition. But who gave that order? Who held the brush? Were they acting under instruction from a church authority, or entirely on their own judgment? We do not know. We know only that they were skilled, that they were decisive, and that their correction stood unchallenged for nearly 500 years. There is one more detail. The Ghent altarpiece has 12 surviving original panels. The panel in the lower left, the Just Judges, is not one of them. It is a copy, painted in 1945. The original was stolen on the night of April 10, 1934, by a man named Arsène Goudartier. Goudartier suffered a fatal heart attack shortly after the theft and died without telling anyone where he had hidden the panel. It has never been found. The most restored, most analyzed painting in Western art history is, technically, still incomplete. The lamb that visitors see today in St. Bavo's Cathedral is the lamb Van Eyck painted in 1432. The forward-facing eyes, the eyes that a 16th century hand had decided the world was not ready to see, are visible again for the first time in approximately 500 years. Every scholarly interpretation written before 2019, every theological analysis of the lamb's symbolic passivity, every claim about Van Eyck's intention, all of it was constructed in part on someone else's correction. 600 years of devotion, scholarship, and loss, all directed at an image that carried, beneath its surface, a different image, one that nobody living had ever seen. The restoration did not change what the altarpiece is, it changed what we now know it to be. Every question we thought we had settled about Van Eyck's intention, every interpretation of the lamb's stillness as theological statement, must now be reconsidered with the knowledge that the stillness was added. Van Eyck intended something stranger and in its own way more demanding. The image he made does not look away. It looks directly at you, with the full weight of what it was designed to be. It has been waiting to do that since 1432.